Do you folks want to see how I glaze these platters step by step? Well, if that's something that you folks want to see, stick around and I'll show you how I did it. Alright, so in this week's video, I'm going to show you step by step how I glaze these platters. And it's not going to be as in-depth as the other glazing video that I have in the description below and right here in this link. So I'm going to fast forward through some parts in the actual video because I want to focus on the swipes that you see in the middle, which is a little different and something that I have not covered in the previous glazing video. And so we're going to go ahead and talk about quickly these 6 basic steps of glazing. Number 1 is to find your piece from wherever it's located after it's fired. Number 2 is to get rid of the dust on it, whether that's wiping it or rinsing it. Number 3 is waxing the bottom, which is optional. You don't really need to do it, but I recommend it. Number 4 is applying your glaze. Number 5 is making sure there's no glaze on the bottom and wiping it clean. And then number 6, you put it in the kiln, and when you get it back, you should have a finished piece. Now that's a very oversimplified step for glazing, and I'm going to go over all 6 of them for the 2 platters that I have so that we can get from this to this. And when I apply the glaze, I'm going to show you 2 different methods: brushing, pouring, and dipping. Well, actually 3, sorry. Brushing, pouring, and dipping. And then we'll see the final results. So we're getting started with removing any dust on our piece. Now, there are some rumors going online that dust on your piece does not cause glaze flaws, so you don't really need to remove it. You can just start to glaze it right away. But if your piece has been sitting for a while, most likely dust has settled. So I always recommend to remove any dust. And that's just something that I learned, and I just feel more comfortable doing it. And then so there are 2 main ways to do it. Number 1 is you get a container of water and you get your trusty sponge, and you just take your sponge and the water, and then you just squeeze out all the water, make sure it's damp but not dripping, and then you just gently swipe the surface to remove any dust that might be on the inside surface, exterior surface, and then the bottom. Now, of course, the faster way is just to rinse this in the sink with water, but that will cause a lot of water to get absorbed into the clay, and you usually want to wait 24 hours before you start glazing this, because it's oversaturated, glaze won't really stick. So I always recommend using a sponge if you plan to start glazing the same day. All right, so we got it clean. And then the next step would be to wax the bottom. Now, to wax the bottom, it's not really required. You don't really need wax, but wax will help repel any glaze from the bottom, because if any glaze is on the bottom of your piece, it'll get stuck in the kiln. And so I just like waxing all my bottoms because it's just that much easier to remove the glaze. Some people just get a big sponge and wipe the surface, and so only the very bottom touching the surface will be glaze free. But I just like using wax because I just want everything easy and I don't want to have to worry about over removing glaze as I wipe. And so we buy the wax in the gallon because it's a lot more economical. This is Wax On by the company, and what I like doing is I portion it out into these smaller glass jars so that it's easier for the students to grab, and because if you leave this open to oxygen, the entire jug, it will start to harden. So that way, if this is open, it's only a little bit. And I do water it down a little bit because it is very sticky, and it just kind of clumps a little harder if it's not watered down. So I usually water it about 2 parts wax to 1 part water, and you can water it based on your preference. You don't really need to water it, but I did notice from this wax it is a little stringy, it's sticky, and that might be due to age because it is about 5 years old, so I gotta buy some new ones. But anyway, I got the purple wax here, and so I'm using the pottery wheel to apply the wax, and the first thing I need to do is get this centered. Got the wheel on. Let's make sure it turns on. Okay, good. Put your piece down, and then we could do the tap centering by every time the clay gets closer to my right finger, I tap it into center. So this is best to practice on a piece that is not ceramic, so plastic is really good. And so there we go, that's centered. Another way you can try to center is the push center. So you basically have your hands around the piece and you gently start pushing it into center. So I'm gently pushing with one hand or the other or both, depending on how you like it. And then my hands are like these C's, and I'm just gently nudging it into center. So in this case, I'm pushing more with my right hand, and my left hand's just there as a guide to kind of catch it. And then once you get it close to center, so mostly my thumb is the one pushing, I'm going to stop. Now, it does get a little while to get used to, and sometimes it just doesn't want to get centered, or you get it close, but it's not perfect. So this is a really good technique to practice. Flat objects like plates and platters are a little easier to learn this, but sometimes it just doesn't get centered because I don't really use it much, so I much prefer the tap centering. And then when I tap center, my left hand is applying pressure so it doesn't shift off. Okay? Or you can do it the old school way, of course. If it's off center, every time it touches your finger, push it into center. Nothing fancy, just a little more time consuming. But like I said, I like the tap centering. Alright, there we go. Now it is centered. And so when I'm applying the wax, I'm just going to wax the entire flat bottom because I don't want any glaze on the bottom. If I were to only wax the flat sections, my trim section here is so close to the actual foot that the glaze here may stick to the surface. So I'm just going to do the whole bottom. And I got some dedicated wax brushes for this. I put red tape on them so my students know that this is only for wax, because wax tends to get really sticky, and if you don't wash it with soap and water properly, it will get really gummy and it doesn't really work well. So it does make the brushes less usable, so I get my crappy brushes for that. Anyway, I got my wax, and I'm gonna kind of give it a little swirl because it is mixed with water, so it does separate. And I'm going to spin the wheel. I'm going to take my bigger brush because I'm going to wax the whole flat side first. You can see how sticky it is. Kind of looks like boogers. But I release the stickiness and I start applying it. And I start brushing it on the surface. Now, the stickiness can pose issues, and you can water it down even more so it's less sticky or less like traily. I don't know how you describe that. But I notice when you water it down too much, it applies well, but it actually doesn't resist as good. So there's a fine line between getting the stickiness gone versus it actually working like how it's supposed to. So it's almost like glue in a sense. But I'm just going to brush it on, get a nice even coating of this because I don't want any glaze sticking to the bottom. And so I'm just going back into my original area, applying it nice and slowly. And then when I get closer to this section, just making sure I remove any of that stringiness. That's the word I'm looking for, stringiness, so it doesn't get onto the piece.
If you're enjoying these videos, please don't forget to like and subscribe. That way it helps to grow this little channel and you can see the videos being released every week.
Okay, the whole top section looks good. Now I'm going to do the exterior of the foot. So I'm going to put this away and use the more skinny version and then load it up by twisting it. Get rid of all those little strings. And then just like I'm trimming, I'm going to apply it on the outside. And I'm going to bring it down just to do the only foot section. And so I'm going to add a little more. I'm going to do one more round of it just to ensure that the outside of the foot is properly waxed. And if the wax does get somewhere where you don't want it, I found the easiest way to remove it is wet sanding it. So using sanding blocks or sandpaper or sanding pads, add a little water to the pad and sand until that area gets wax free. Some other people said rubbing alcohol can work. I never tried it, but sanding, in my opinion, works really well. Alright, so that is waxed. I'll let it dry. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes. I'll get the other piece on. We'll wax it real quick and move on to the glazing. Alright, so the wax is dry on the bottom. You can't really see it because it dried clear, but it's there. And now I am ready to start applying the glaze. And so like the picture that you see here, you can see that there is a swoosh of glaze made by brushing it on. And so at this point, is where I'll grab my brush, and you have to decide if you want to apply it directly on the clay or you're going to glaze it with a base coat and then apply it. Now, I recommend applying it directly on the clay because you can easily wipe or remove the glaze with water and a sponge if you mess up. But if you put a base coat on it and then you try to brush it on and you mess up, it's so much harder to remove because you're gonna have to scratch it off and you may just scratch through the base layer. So I'm gonna apply it right now, and I'm gonna put these on the side because I actually have some practice pieces. That's something that I recommend you try too. And I have these, they look like paper, but these are really thin ceramic slab plates that were made, and I'm going to practice brushing the glaze on top of here using water just to get a flow for how the brush moves, and then I'm going to do it for real with glaze on my actual pieces. And so I like practicing just to kind of get a feel for it because every time I do this technique my body doesn't remember the movement. And I like using the wheel for this because I could spin the wheel, and when I drop the brush I then use that to help me do the swirl, so I don't have to move my hand very far. And when you practice on these, you can practice with some water if you want, so you don't waste glaze, or you can use your glaze right away if you want. But for this one, I'm just going to get practice with water to get a full flow for it, and you will be able to see the water on top of the piece. And I'm going to do a couple of dry runs where I'm spinning the wheel slowly. I start from the middle, and I work my way out, and then I brush. So that feels pretty good. Then we get some water on. Now normally if this slides like how you saw it, you may want to put some sort of fabric or material down so that this stuck. So batmate works really well in this case. But let's spin it slowly, plop it on, and then brush. Okay, so you can see that it was a little more asymmetric, so if I wanted more centered, then I would have to make sure that I go a little off and then swirl a little more to get it a little more even. Now as you're watching the overhead cam, you see that the water is already starting to evaporate. So I can get another run at this before it gets a little too oversaturated with water. I'm gonna spin it again, try to visualize where the middle is, and let's try again, a little off from the center this time. And that looked a lot better, and if it didn't slide on me, I would have been able to swish this even more. Okay, so I'm gonna try one more time using a heavier piece. This one has already been fired once. The other one was a bisque, so the water's not going to show up as well. You can kind of see it shows up, but it's not as defined. But at least I can get one more practice run on a heavier piece. And this was really dusty, that you can see. Okay, spin slowly. Okay, and once again it's shifted. So to get it stuck, I'm gonna get my batmate. I'm gonna do it one more time. So the batmate comes to the rescue again, and I heard in the comments that you could use wet newspaper, so you could try that as well. But I have these, and they work really well for me. Okay, now it's a lot more grippy. Let's do one more test run. Okay, and then once again off to the side. We'll try to follow the same lines I had, but this time spin the wheel slowly. There we go. Here we go. And that I like, a nice big swoop over the edge and coming off. So I feel pretty confident. Let's go ahead and get the real pieces on, and then let's get the glaze going. Okay, so put it on top, center, and it looks pretty centered to me. And if you wanted to, you could practice with water one more time, but if you do that, you may want to wait until the glaze dries, or the water dries, before you start the actual attempt. So let's go ahead and then just kind of get all this water off. You probably don't want to do that in your own studio and get water everywhere. And I have my floating blue glaze, which you can see an example of the piece in this picture right here. And this is going to be the base coat. Now, one last thing to remember is when you overlap glazes. A glaze will change when you overlap it with another. It would also change if it's under. So if you put it under a glaze or over, it will be slightly different. So make sure you test out the combinations before you try this on your own. Okay, here we go. Spin the wheel slowly. And I'm going to kind of let that drip off a little bit. Don't want it too runny. Okay, I'm going to kind of rotate it to kind of even it out. And I can see my dead center. And let's go ahead and do it. All right. Big swoop, and kind of trails off and have the nice brush strokes. I'm okay with this, but let's try my second round and then let's see how that one will turn out. All right, got it centered. This time, I think I need to move my hand a little faster so that I can swoop the brush a little more. Okay, once again, let's get this to drain out. And I'm going to slap the brush a little harder on the board this time. Okay, here we go. All right, and there we have it. The 2 swoops of the glaze. And if I didn't like this, I could take a sponge, wipe away all the glaze, let it dry for at least an hour. I would say 24 is best, and try again. But for demo sakes, we're gonna get these covered in our next glaze and then finally dipped back into the floating blue to finish these off. So let's get the next glaze area ready to then get the inside covered. All right, so I have my glaze area set up. Normally I have them in these big buckets that I dip in, but because these pieces are a little wider, I want to make sure I have an easier way to then dip these upside down. Now, in my other glazing video, the way I did it, there's a little clip here. And so as you can see, after I pour it in, I flip and I hold it by the foot and I dip it into the glaze. However, these pieces are so big that I cannot palm it comfortably. So I had to think of a creative solution on how to be able to pour glaze in, pour it out, and then dip just the top section of this without having to palm it. And so what I came up with is, I think, quite ingenious. I have a vacuum hooked up to a funnel that I can turn it on and then use the suction of the vacuum to then hold it. And I use this vacuum for other pieces because the nozzle is pretty good at holding smaller pieces for the ones that I can't hold easily. And just by attaching a funnel, I now can hold a larger piece because it has more surface area. And so to test the suction, what I did was I got the piece, I flipped it upside down, and then I got the funnel, put it on top, and then I just turn on the vacuum. And this thing is pretty darn strong. I'm shaking it and it's still just really secure. And so, even as it's turning down right there, I can finally release. It is so strong that I can easily do this technique. And so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to get this suctioned on top. I'm going to pour the glaze in, move it around, pour it out into the bucket, and then flip upside down to then dip the top half into the glaze bowl. And so if all goes well, I should have my inside glazed nicely and the outside half glazed nicely. So let's just get everything set up and get this ready because this can be a little nerve-wracking. All right, I'm just about ready. I got my piece ready. This is ready and mixed. I got my glaze already in the measuring cup. So let's go ahead and get this suctioned on and wish me luck. Here we go. And there we go. We see the light black specks inside of the glaze. That's going to be those speckles that pop up. And now that the vacuum's off, I can easily remove this. And let's get the second piece going. All right, here we go. Let's do it.
All right, so I have this little drip here, and before it dries off completely, I can just easily kind of soften it with my finger. I can go back later to shave this down a little bit, and then we're gonna get the next glaze mixed up, and we're gonna dip the outside half. All right, so I'm gonna be scratching these glaze drips that I have, and normally I wanna do it over the same glaze so I don't waste it, but because I have this big bucket of water, I can scrape it directly over here. And when you do this, ideally you wanna do it with a mask on, and you wanna do it over a container of water or the glaze so that the powder, as you can see, goes into the buckets. And you don't really need to do this, but I just want a little more of an even coverage. And so I'm just gently scraping and then buffing it with my finger so that it's not as bulky in those spots. And this particular glaze is incredibly powdery and dusty, so it's actually easy to do this, but it just is not the best to hold. And then when you shave it, you want to do light layers at a time, because if you shave too much too fast, you may just take the whole thing off. Got the glaze mixed up, I got my piece ready, and the first thing that I'm going to do is kind of locate where the high side of the glaze is. So looking at this, hopefully it's in focus, this looks like the high side, these two. So I want that side facing me, so I know how much I need to tilt. So I'm gonna tilt it more towards me when I dip, because what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hold it by the rim, dip, and then move it around and let it dance, pop it out, shake it, and then put it on the sponge for it to then dry. So it's going to be a 2 to 3 second dip. So let's go ahead and let's do it. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, and pop. Shake all the glaze off. Hopefully I didn't miss a spot. We'll find out in a second. Okay, and then if you are brave enough, you can just hold it. If you don't want to waste any glaze, you can kind of push all that stuff back in. And then you can just take your sponge and just wipe at least the majority of the glaze. Okay, flip to the other side, wipe. And then if you do this, make sure you don't hit the actual naked clay body or the glaze on the clay body, because you will pull that glaze off. All right, looking at it, there's a droplet here, so I can try to soften it a little bit with my finger. If I get a little water on my finger, I can actually smooth it out. And so that's another method you can do without having to file it down. All right, so overall, looks pretty good. I covered everything that I needed, and I just gotta clean the bottom. So let's put this aside, and let's get the second piece dipped. Next piece, let's locate the high side. So this whole side, so that side will be on me. And let's go ahead and then do the 2 to 3 second dip. This time we'll continue with the 3. Ready, go. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, and pop. Shake. Get all that glaze to come off. Okay, and then tilt. Push any excess off with my finger. And then ideally I should have washed the sponge before I did this one, but I'm still able to get the majority of the big glaze off. And I'm going to take these to the sink and do a final wipe down to get all the rest of the glaze off of the pieces. So let's bring this to the sink. I got to wipe all that off over there. All right, and last part before I pop these in the kiln, I have to wipe the bottom so that they are completely glaze free. So I have another smaller sponge, just wipe every single surface. The wax did really well on the bottom section. However, on the sides, let's hopefully get into focus. On the sides here, not that well. So I'm gonna go back with my sponge and wipe back and forth to then remove any excess that shouldn't be there to get a nice clean foot. So this part's gonna take me a little while. And you can see right here, for some odd reason, a lot of the glaze just got stuck. So back and forth movements That'll get rid of the majority of the glaze. And then again with the clean side. So most likely that area wasn't completely waxed. And so note to future self is just make sure I wax that a little better. But let's go ahead and just finish wiping all of these to then put this in the kiln. All right, both pieces are wiped, cleaned, and ready to go into the kiln. So let's pop these in and cross our fingers and hope they turn out awesome.
And here are the final results. We have the piece number 1 and piece number 2, and you can see that there are glossiness to the thicker part of the blue, and then it fades out onto a matte. And there's a nice contrast against the dark rich blue to the lighter soft blue against the matte creamish white with the specks. And I'm really happy the way these turned out. Let's look at this one first. Actually, this is the first one I did. You can see that the brush strokes fade out as it goes out towards the edge. There's some brush strokes on the side too. That's really cool. I would have loved if this wrapped around a little more, but overall, the first time I did it for the session, really cool. And then the second one that I did, I whacked it against the plate a little harder. It faded out a little more, has more of that edge, and every time you do this technique, the second time, third time, fourth time is usually a little better. And then the outside edge, you can see the nice overlap where it goes from the matte white into the richer blue, the same blue we use on the inside. And so overall, I'm really happy the way these turned out, especially this one. This one's my favorite. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed that little glazing series. Hopefully you have something a little different that you haven't seen before. And if these are the things that you guys like to see and you want to see more techniques that are ceramic and pottery wheel content, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can see the new videos released every week. And I have some great news, some big news. I'm actually going to revamp my Mud Club and Mud Club Plus membership tiers. I'm going to remove the Mud Club Plus. So I do want to give one last shout out to all those people who have been Mud Club Plus members. We have Michelle Zhu, James Oates, and Winona Bannon. And so starting in June, I'm going to remove the Mud Club Plus tier, and I'm going to take some of those perks and drop it and add it to the Mud Club members so that everyone who's a Mud Club member will actually receive more benefits. And the reason why I want to remove it is because I felt like I wasn't giving enough to the Mud Club Plus members, and I want to make sure that everyone who is part of the Mud Club feels like they're getting something more than just supporting the channel, which I do really cherish, and I thank you guys from the bottom of my heart. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of those perks, like the curated list of videos, and I'm going to make it accessible to everyone in the Mud Club. And I'm going to probably do a post on the community chat or community forums or whatever it is and give you the link there so that you guys can then access it. And there are some other things that I'm going to add in the works, and I'll keep you guys updated through the posts. Or maybe in the next video, I'll have it at the end. But anyway, I do want to thank everyone who has been a member and anyone who has been a Mud Club Plus member. Hopefully moving forward, there's more incentive to become part of our awesome community. But other than that, thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you folks in the next video.